Hi, it's John Zockley here. I'm actually going to reintroduce myself here in a minute in the video, and I just wanted to add this note at the beginning. I've seen some people around who suggest to me that I should just relax, and wait, and that everything's going to be just fine. I get a lot of that, but you know what? It's just really a very small percentage in a cloud of, things that are meant to torment me. And the reason I'm making this video now is to hopefully make everybody understand why I keep on pushing and writing about this situation and making videos like this. You will understand that, every day that what I'm about to show you now goes on is another day that, I needed to end and for someone to officially acknowledge me. I've made several reports to San Francisco police. I've filed a complaint with the FBI a long time ago about my situation, and no one has ever officially acknowledged me. And there's a lot of strange things that goes on, and that's why I make videos like this. And I would hope that after watching this, if you don't understand at this point why I push every day for an end, you very well should after watching this. And if you don't at that point, then there's nothing I can do. So all I can say is that to the people who I always see doing this, it has no effect because I have no reason to trust you. Hi, it's John Zockley here. I want to take a few minutes to talk about some strange things that have been happening in my life over about the past year. Today is April 26th. All these things that I'm about to show you started, I think, right around this time last year, probably, 2014. Now, I'm living in the Boyd Hotel in San Francisco, which is a single-room occupancy hotel. It's for people of low income. And I moved in here in December of 2013, I think, or January of 2014. I don't remember which. And I've posted some video that proves that some of my neighbors are possessed. And part of what's happening to me is that if you haven't added it up, is I'm being haunted, literally. And apparently I've literally been cursed. Now, there is a movie. First of all, if you haven't read my blog, I've associated my situation with some filmmakers. And one is a writer named Kevin Andrew Walker, who wrote a movie called Event Horizon. He also wrote The Game with Michael Douglas. And there's another film that I came across when I was researching filmmakers called An American Haunting, and sure enough, it had pedophilia in the theme. It was something about a young girl who had been abused getting back at a pedophile who abused her. And as I said, it's been indicated to me in very covert ways that I'm suspected of pedophilia, which is positively absurd. And sure enough, as I said, the name of the movie is American Haunting, and all these things kind of come together in what I'm telling you today. And one of the things that started last year is I started having some strange dreams. I've had, I don't know, 5 or 6 maybe, and some of them a couple were really gory and disturbing. And I know that these things, whether maybe it's real, like a legitimate haunting, but I don't know if it's that or these things are actually being kind of transmitted into my head electronically. Which I suspect because I've learned that they can do some strange things. I wrote on my blog about, there's an entry in my diary called Digital Glitch Face, which kind of explains or illustrates how I can't always trust what I see or experience. But anyway, that movie, An American Haunting, is very significant, and Event Horizon is going to be significant here as well when I get to it later. So in addition to these strange dreams I had, I've also noticed, I think, sometime around the middle of 2014, that at night, while I'm lying in bed with my eyes closed, I see lights flashing. I say lights plural, but there's really just one, and it will flash very briefly for about a half a second. Some less. I think I kind of timed it up when I made this video, and I think the longest ones are maybe a half a second for the ones that flash. And say that would happen once, and then maybe 10 minutes later there would be another one, and then there were different iterations of it as well. And I'm going to show you some of those right now. And so the first, I'll show you the one that very simply flashed briefly and looked a lot like this. Now, these flashing lights weren't always in the same place in my field of vision. They moved around randomly. So here's one other example of what it might look like. Other times, the center of the flashing light would be outside my field of vision, so to speak, and all I would see would be the outer edge of the blur of the light shining, which looks a little bit like this. For a long time, that's all that it was. I think for maybe a few months at least, it was always just a simple flash like that in the darkness. And then at one point it changed, and I started to see lights that were actually kind of sliding across my field of vision, usually towards the top of it. And it looked something like this. I also noticed that the sliding lights would sometimes travel vertically, like this. So for several months, it was some random combination of what I just showed you that I would see almost every night. Not every single night, but at least say 5 nights a week. The flashing or sliding lights. And what would happen is I'd go to bed, and maybe an hour after I went to bed or 2 hours after I went to bed, sometimes in the middle of the night, these things would start. And I'd see maybe 4 or 5 at the most, all within the space of about an hour. Then, about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, I started to see some new ones, and they were all positioned exactly the same, directly in the center of my line of vision, but slightly towards the top, which you'll see how these are in the illustrations. And the first one, and the other thing that's different about these is that they were all in clear focus, whereas the other one is a small bulb that was appearing to be out of focus, though I did see it in focus once, which I'll talk about later. But the next ones were all in focus, and the first one was like a bulb that you see, a fixture that you see like in a warehouse, where it's a bulb sticking out of a wall, and it has one of those kind of little cage protectors over it that has like 2 or 3 rings going around it, and then 2 loops that like cross over the top of the bulb. So there's like a cross, on in front of the top of the bulb is how you would see it. You've seen it before. It's kind of like the thing a mechanic uses that they hang up, under the hood while they're working. But it was like something that sticks out of a wall. And what I saw on one occasion, and again in clear focus, looked a lot like this. I'm trying to show these to you in about the chronological order that they appeared to me. And the next one is very much exceptional to everything. And, I have this one centered in the frame, but I don't think this one actually was centered. It's a little off to the left and maybe up a little bit. And the way this is going to appear is that each little bar of light looks kind of like a fluorescent light in my illustration. That's not what it was. It was like there was some sort of partition, like a thin black wall, like maybe a heavy piece of vinyl or plastic or something like that. And these vertical slats were cut in it. And again, like the other flashes, there was an incandescent bulb that was being moved across these bars from the other side of this partition. And so I could see, like, wherever the center of the bulb was at the time, you could see the glow in some of the other slats. And that doesn't come through in my illustration because my graphic design skills are limited. But so just keep that in mind when you watch this. It kind of looks like separate fluorescent balls, but that's not what it was. And it looked a lot like this. Now the following light that flashed to me, again, was directly in the middle of my field of vision and slightly towards the top. And what it was like a sharp-edged cube-shaped fixture, but it wasn't a perfect cube. It was a tall cube, like a rectangle, standing on end. It was tallish, and I think that the proportions, as I have them described here, is pretty accurate. I'd say it was roughly 10 by 7. That's probably a pretty good guess. And this is what it looked like. The next light I saw towards the top of my field of vision, right in the center, stands out among the others. It appeared to me as like a kind of oval situated vertically that was shining, like it had like light rays coming off of it. And when you first look at it, you might think there's a very bright light and that those spines coming off it are a product of its shining. But I'll tell you, I'm relatively certain that what I was seeing was a fixture shaped like that. I don't think that it was a product of the brightness of the light. It was actually a pre-shaped kind of molded fixture attached to a wall or something right in front of me. And another light that appeared in the same position was just a basic oval without all those shiny spines coming off of it, which is part of the reason I'm pretty sure the other one was actually a shaped fixture. One last light that was in about the same position is a little bit different than the others again. This one was just a plain round light fixture. I don't think it was a bulb. It was actually a fixture in the same spot, but it was as if it was on a yellow wall. Like the field of my vision was all yellow, and the light was white when it flashed. It looked something like this. Now, there actually have been a few occasions, a select few, when I saw these flashing lights during daylight hours while I was awake. Often they would be up like in the darkness of my eyelids, so they looked basically similar to, as they did at night, though they were more difficult to notice, but they did look white. Now, there was one occasion when there was one that was closer to the center of my field of vision, and it actually looked like a very dark purple color. And it had like it was slightly splotchy, like there were some spiny kind of random lines coming off it. And there were two things that this kind of reminds me of. A, sometimes when you glance at the sun, and then there's a spot left in your field of vision, the shape of it looked a lot like that. And then the other thing is that it was all kind of akin to a photograph negative, the film negative that we used to use to make photographs. In that the lights are usually white when I had my eyes closed, but when this one appeared in the daylight, it appeared like a dark purple color. And it looks something like this. I've written on my blog of how there are some other strange things I've seen with my eyes closed at night. I noticed one thing one night after I've been rubbing my eyes, and when you rub your eyes, you see some strange things like patterns that I think is just a physical product of how your eyes work. But when that was fading out, I saw something kind of strange, and what I did was, for the next couple weeks, I just took my two fingers and just kind of very lightly pressed them over my eyes with my eyes closed to see if I would see anything, and I did see some weird things. And one night I saw what looked like I was looking through a peephole that was floating around in my line of vision that had images from a sci-fi fantasy comic books. Okay. Another night I saw the Windows Media Player visualization that's called Event Horizon. Another night when I wasn't doing that with my eyes, in the middle of the night I just woke up and I was awake with my eyes closed, and it looked like it was a full screen. Filling my field of vision was like an image that looked like a clip from a Hanna-Barbera cartoon of a white ape running comically towards you with, I think, maybe had a cigar hanging out of his mouth. Maybe it was more like a Yeti, like an abominable snowman. But one of those nights when I was doing this with my eyes closed, they flashed some of these lights at me, and they did the one that slides from left to right. And as I've shown them to you, they're blurry and out of focus. Well, this night when I was doing that, and I saw the light came on and slid from left to right. It was in clear focus. And what it looked like appeared to be a tiny little bulb that was a clear incandescent bulb. You know, you can see the filament in it burning. And it was attached to some kind of, like the end of an arm of some kind of machine, and it moved slowly from left to right like I showed in the other videos. And it just so happened that on my way home from church recently, I walked by a restaurant and noticed they had some of the bulbs strung around it, and I'll show you that in case you're not having a good idea of what I'm talking about, because this bulb is a lot like what these bulbs are like. Except that in my picture, the quality of this picture isn't very good. You can't see the shape of the element that good, but you'll get an idea of what I mean. I'm going to show you the restaurant where I saw it, and then a close up of the bulb. Now I want to go back and take a look at one of the previous clips of those different shaped fixtures I saw in the center of my vision, namely the cube-shaped fixture. Let's take one more look at that. Now what's different about that cube shot, that's different than all the others, is immediately after that cube flashed at me, I heard a gay American male voice say the following: "It causes the brain to panic." Now, whether or not you've been following along with my blog, or if I mentioned this video, I don't remember. But I've been told twice on separate occasions in San Francisco that my whole life is an experiment. One woman said exactly that: "Your whole life is an experiment." Another said, "You're an experiment." Those are exact quotes. Which I'm sure has to do with this voice I heard that said it causes the brain to panic. Now, you know, starting in 2008, I started getting stalked and harassed openly, and I've traced my situation to a one-day experiment I took part in the University of Toledo in the early 90s. Also, when I was a little boy, I had a toy stuffed animal named Lonesome. Very sad-looking dog, and I found out last year that experiment I took part in Toledo was a loneliness experiment. So I'm sure that is all related to those women's comment and this comment: "It causes the brain to panic." You know, I'm being experimented on in a number of different ways. Anyway, I've had reason to trace my situation to certain filmmakers. And the most important person, I think, in the whole filmmaker situation that I've found is a guy named Andrew Kevin Walker. He's a film writer. He wrote either the original version or the rewrite of the movie The Game with Michael Douglas. I don't recall which. And again, same thing for Event Horizon. Now, The Game, it's been suggested to me that my situation is kind of like a version of The Game. I have no memory of willingly and knowingly in a sober state agreeing to any such thing, but they would have me believe that I did. Of course, being set up with loneliness from the time you're 5 so that you're easily suggestible, easily conned, you know, is the setup anyway. You know, that's the whole thing. My whole life has been a setup to sabotage it by way of being easily conned and easily influenced, easily triggered and easily baited and easily provoked. And they've been baiting me and triggering me ever since. Anyway, I've only seen parts of The Game. I've never seen the whole thing, but I saw some parts of it just last night, and sure enough, I noticed that it seemed to be an ongoing theme in the film to have a mostly dark scene with a bright light in the middle of the shot, or not necessarily in the middle, but somewhere in the shot, have a single bright light or bright light fixture in the middle of a dark scene. And I'm sure if you watch the movie, it won't be difficult for you to confirm that. There are some other elements in the film that are also common in my situation. And in the movie Event Horizon, which is just a disgusting film, there are some very quick clips of very, very gory images. And in at least one of those clips, if you watch them, you will see a scene that includes one or several tiny little clear light bulbs, just like the ones I'm talking about. Now, I followed a chain online of filmmakers associated with those that I first came to suspect, and Walker was one of the first, and I looked at people that he worked with and other films he worked on and people who worked on those, etc. And one of the ones I landed on was a movie called An American Haunting. And sure enough, it's become very evident to me that I'm in fact being haunted and I'm possibly cursed. For something I did when I was 4 years old, I guess. But in An American Haunting, sure enough, it has a pedophilia theme, something about a girl getting back at someone who abused her as a child by haunting him. And, people have made comments to me suggesting that, authorities apparently suggesting that I'm suspected of pedophilia, which is positively absurd. Those three films are kind of key to what I'm showing you here, and these flashing light things is part of the way that I'm being kind of haunted in a manufactured way. And the reason that I know it's kind of a, not a real haunting is because I've seen other things at night with my eyes closed. I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier in this video or not, but one of the things I've seen at night with my eyes closed is a little small circle, like a peephole in the darkness, slowly floating across my field of vision. And in that peephole were images of sci-fi fantasy comic books, like close-ups of different sections of pages from sci-fi fantasy comic books, one after another. They'd fade out and fade up and fade out and fade up. I think I saw 6 or 7 of them until it kind of faded out of view. And I mention that because I've also figured out that my situation is related to cults. And I read recently that something that cults do is try to create an aura of omniscience for the subject of their brainwashing and mind control. And that didn't surprise me at all when I read it, because I thought many months ago, maybe years ago, that someone is trying to play God with me. And I know the theology enough to know that what they're doing is inaccurate. God doesn't care if you smoke cigarettes, I promise you. I promise you. It has nothing to do with it. It's hardly a moral decision. But anyway, the other reason that I know that someone's playing God, and it's not real God, is because I am quite sure that God isn't into Chinese animated sci-fi fantasy comic books. I thought I was done with this video, but something came up recently that is very significant. I hadn't seen those flashing lights for, about the last almost 2 weeks, I think. It had stopped. And today is, it's Mother's Day, May 10th. And something came up late Friday night that was very significant. And I need to tell you a little backstory on this. Some of you know, and some of you don't know. My phone calls and emails get intercepted. I've filed reports with the San Francisco police. I've filed a report with the FBI. No one's ever acknowledged me officially or directly about anything. So you may have seen me on the street corner in San Francisco holding a sign, handing out flyers. I started with a sign that said "Brainwashed by Socialists." And, everything I do in that regard here is directed at tourists, because this is the center of, San Francisco is the home of anti-American, anti-Christian, socialist brainwashing. They also try to turn me gay. But, and I knew that even so, even if I was getting the tourists, that socialist brainwashing sign wasn't going to do that well, just because it's not on people's mind. The reason that they're getting away with it is because people don't even think about it, and that's how they get away with it. They do it all covertly, and if you don't know, you don't know about it. And they assume that people they've done it to, like me, they drive them insane, drive you till you're living in a destitution, and they assume that no one will ever be able to let anybody know about it, and that's how they do it. So I didn't get a lot of good reaction to the socialist brainwashing sign, except for I guess, from some selected few people, including some World War II veterans. Then I still went to the anti-Christian brainwashing sign with a flyer, and I went to some very direct events that were very direct. I went to the pro-life rally with a sign and handed one to a producer from EWTN. And that day, in the space of about 2 hours, I handed out 200 flyers, which is by far the most I've ever given out, to all people who were there for a pro-life rally. So, and then I did that a little while longer, and then I gave up on that, and I figured, well, I can understand why nothing comes of that either, because again, even though I was targeting the right crowd, San Francisco is San Francisco. But recently I switched to a sign that says, subject of anti-American brainwashing, and I know that's one that can't be ignored forever. So I stand out by City Hall, and I go to where some tourists are, and I get real good reaction to it. And eventually the mayor of San Francisco will have to acknowledge it, considering some of the factors in my situation. So anyway, I was doing that the other day out in front of City Hall with the sign that said subject of anti-American brainwashing, and this is a great example of something that happens a lot when I'm doing this. A socialist operative came by and engaged me in conversation, and he looked really kind of messy. Something was wrong with one of his eyes, and you can just tell kind of by the way they talk who they are. And, it's like I'm standing here holding a sign saying that I'm the subject of anti-American brainwashing, and he asked me, well, what about the Tuskegee Airmen? And I just thought, well, it's terrible that that happened to them, but, I'm working on my problem now, and then my answer to him was something to that effect. It's like, it's too bad that happened, man. I'm glad it got exposed, and now I've got this problem that I think happened to other people as well, so I'm working on it now, and that was my answer to him. And he left, and he came back by a little bit later, and they always act kind of like really fake nice. I can tell that they use this kind of affected, kind of mocking, kind of fake niceness. And he said, "Oh, I'm gonna read your blog, man. I read your flyer, and I'll take a look at your blog." And then, sure enough, after 2 weeks, when I hadn't seen any flashing lights or heard any audible political indoctrination messages, and I don't know if I mentioned that or not, that over the past few years I have audio messages that are transmitted in my head about radical anti-American and socialist messages. Sure enough, after 2 weeks of nothing, the night after I spoke with that guy, I saw a flashing light, and it was immediately followed by an audio message that was something about openness to other messages, okay? And this is important for two reasons. One is, the audio political indoctrination, socialist brainwashing messages started long before the flashing lights did, okay? And I wasn't really positive that they were related, okay? And this experience, after 2 weeks of nothing, very much proves to me that they are. The other thing that's significant about it is, and I wrote about this on my blog, when I lived when I was a student at Ohio State University, I worked as a bartender at BW3. It's now called Buffalo Wild Wings. And there are a number of instances that occurred when I worked there, including some of the things that are used to drive you to a state of isolation. But another one that's very significant that I didn't realize till over the past year, after I found that New Republic magazine, was a kind of tallish, thin, light-skinned black guy used to come into BW3, and just like this guy out in front of City Hall, they always act very nice. They're like, "Hey, how's it going?" And they always act really nice like that. And I remember he said to me, one of the first things he said to me, and he was kind of a semi-regular. Like, he came in once, then he came in maybe 3 or 4 more times while I was working there. And it was the first time I met him. He said to me, people with eyebrows shaped like yours, that means they're open-minded. And the whole thing that's happening to me, it's a big con. It's kind of a brainwash scam. They use neuro-linguistic programming, and it's kind of this big con, and they always act very nice while they're doing it. And the point I'm making is that duping you into being too open-minded is a critical aspect of this brainwashing, because what they do is they use a kind of reverse psychology to guilt you. You know, if you think, you know, open-mindedness has a positive, correlation that's standard to it. So if someone says, if you think you're not open-minded, or if someone accuses you of not being open-minded, you might feel a little guilt. Okay, and that's a big part of what they do. So they say, oh, you look open-minded, and you're going to feel real good about that because open-minded is positive. And, you know, they suggested that to me while I've been made vulnerable to suggestion from a young age. So, and then, sure enough, the other day I run into this fella, then I see a flashing light, and then I get an audio message about a lack of openness. So, you know, there you have it. Now, this kind of reverse psychology guilt trip that they use is very important. And there's another way that they use it that I've been thinking about in recent months that I want to mention now. I haven't written about this yet or mentioned in any video either, and it's very important. If you read my blog and watched some of the other videos, I think I wrote about it recently. One of the main ways that they conduct brainwashing and put the subject under mind control is by training them to be hyper empathetic, so that you don't care anything about yourself and all you care about is others. Okay, and part of what I just told you about my encounter in front of City Hall is part of that. Okay, he was, all these things have been happening to me my entire life, at the very least for the past 20 to 25 years, and he was trying to switch my mind to think that none of it's a big deal and that I should be more interested in the problem of some pilots from 50 or 60 years ago. And that's a big part of the scam that's being conducted on me. Okay, it's a little switcheroo, and you know, this other thing I'm about to tell you is a good example of it. I've said that a major part of the brainwashing is and mind control is to train the person to be hyper empathetic, while at the same time making them an emotional, impulsive, knee-jerk reactionary. Okay, those two are the critical components of brainwashing and mind control. The way they make you hyper empathetic is by suggesting to you that you're an uncaring person repeatedly. Okay, they just put it in your ear. Like I said, they sit next to you, they'll engage you directly. That's how they do it. And you could be a very normally caring person who has a proper amount of rational self-interest, who has a good moral disposition, etc. But if they suggest this to you repeatedly and they do it very nicely, eventually you start to believe it, even if you don't know it consciously. And what's going to happen is you're going to get pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed to the point where you're so empathetic, while at the same time your executive function has been impaired, that and you're feeling guilty because of these suggestions, that you get to the point where you just go to this extreme where all you care about is other people, and at the same time you don't care about yourself, and that's how you end up in my position, and that's a very critical part of what they're doing. One more important point on this I forgot to mention. You might be thinking, well, still, how does that work? You're thinking, well, if it's people you know or acquaintances or whatever. The point is, it's not people you know. It's a steady stream of strangers, spaced out. I think maybe over the years, I'd say maybe you have 1 or 2 encounters a week. Maybe only 1 a week. But it's always strangers, and you rarely, if ever, see the same person twice. It's a seemingly random, disparate stream of strangers when it's actually organized. And because you don't know it's organized, you start to believe the things that they're suggesting to you covertly. And that's how they fool you.